A couple of weeks ago, I put out a video talking about the reasons why I've decided to have a go in a small way at doing my own photo printing. I talked about the printer that I'd chosen and why, and I also went through my first go at printing and shared my experience and what I'd learned from it. In today's video, I'm taking it a bit further. I want to try two additional kinds of prints. I want to do a black and white print, and I want to do a small print, and I'll talk about the reasons why I want to do both of those during the course of this video and talk about the experience and the results that I get. I hope you'll enjoy the video. If you do and you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe before you go. I'm led to believe that black and white can be a bit of a challenge to get right, particularly with dye ink based printers, which mine is, as opposed to a pigment based, and also particularly perhaps with printers that are not, kind of professional photo printers, which mine isn't. It's, very much a, an amateur level printer. So I'm really intrigued to see what results I can get. I'm going to be printing it once again on this Canon Pro Luster paper, and I'm going to be once again learning from the experience of a guy called Keith Cooper, who I mentioned several times in the last video, and he said that when he tested this printer out, he got the best black and white results by actually printing using a colour profile that he'd created and which he made available to download, which I've got and I used in the last print as well. What he said was using the native black and white options available produced a colour cast in the image, and the colour profile that he used didn't. So I'm going to go straight for the colour profile because I see no point in repeating somebody else's mistakes. So we'll give it a go and we'll see what it comes out like. Now the image I've chosen to print for black and white is this one, which is of a tree, and it's quite high key but also quite high contrast. It's got some quite dark areas in it and some very bright areas. It's got a lot of fine detail in it, and I'm really interested to see how it comes out. Now, based on the experiences from my previous attempts at printing, I have played around with my monitor brightness and I've dialed it down a bit, because in my last one I found that the image I was seeing on the monitor was significantly brighter than the image that I was seeing on the actual print, and I had to print again, increasing the exposure and the shadows and things like that to get the same result. Now I have played around with that since, and I've got what I think is a good balance between monitor brightness and print brightness, and I've got the latest version of the print up there behind me in a cheap frame. And that brings me on to the second lesson that I've learnt. This image is in a cheap frame. It was just a cheap A4 frame that I used to have some professional qualifications displayed in, and I'd had it knocking around, so I decided to stick the print in it. But what I discovered was that because I'd printed this quite, almost as large as I could on A4 paper, there actually isn't a lot of edge space for a frame. So if you were putting it in a mount or in a frame like I've done here, it doesn't look quite right. Now, unfortunately, I discovered that after I'd done several other versions of the print to get the monitor brightness feeling about right. So I guess that's a valuable lesson learned, and for the print that I'm doing today, I'm going to print it slightly smaller so that if I do decide to stick it in a frame or mount it, there's some space around the outside for that to happen. Let's get this image printing and see what it comes out like. Okay, so here is the print, fresh off the printer. And what I'm looking for is, do the darks and lights kind of broadly match what I was seeing on the screens? In other words, does it look like the brightness is right? I want to see that where I've got areas of fine detail in here, that they're coming out okay. And perhaps even more importantly, I'm interested in seeing whether there's any kind of colour cast on here. My initial reactions to this, looking at it, the fine detail looks good. There's not a loss of detail in the brighter areas. That's still come out much the same as it looks on the screen. The shadow areas actually look brighter than they do on the screen. So it kind of looks like, for black and white prints, I'm getting a brighter image out of the printer than I am for colour prints, which is interesting. And I'm not sure whether this now lacks contrast, particularly in the tree trunk area. Well, there's definitely no colour cast in there at all. The whites are white, the blacks are black, no magenta, no blue. That's good. So I think what I'm going to do a second version of this print, and I'm going to bring the exposure down just a fraction, maybe bring the shadows and the blacks down just a fraction, and print it again and see which looks best. This is the revised version, and you probably can't see a lot of difference on the video, but it's definitely darker. I don't think it's made a lot of difference in the highlight areas. It's about the same, but the shadows are definitely deeper on this. It's definitely got more contrast, and it looks closer to what I'm seeing on the screen. The blacks aren't too squashed up, so it's not like we've got a loss of detail in the blacks, which I didn't want. Now, interestingly, I'm not entirely sure which one I prefer. The slightly darker one looks closer to what I'm seeing on the screen, which looks right to me on the screen. If I make it any brighter on the screen, it looks a bit washed out. But as a physical print, I'm not sure if actually the slightly brighter one doesn't look better, which is interesting. I've never really thought about the fact that maybe prints need to look slightly different to what you're seeing on screen. I don't know. Maybe it's because the screen's backlit and this isn't. I'm also thinking that by the time this goes behind, glass or plastic in some kind of frame, maybe the brighter one will be better. Honestly, I can't decide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to those in a minute. But first, let's put these out of the way. But first, I want to try doing a small print. In my first video about printing, I talked about the fact that I'd become intrigued by the idea of small prints. Basically because they're low cost to do, and the options for what you can do with them just seem much bigger than with big prints. You can display them much more easily. We don't need expensive frames or anything like that. Now, the prints that I've done so far haven't been big prints, but they've been printed on A4 paper, and therefore they're not really small prints. When I was talking small prints, I was thinking, maybe something like this kind of size, which is 5 by 7. So I wanted to have a go at doing a print 5 by 7 and see what it looks like. And it just so happens that I've got some 5 by 7 photo paper knocking around. I've got no idea what make it is. I must have had it for at least 10 years. I'm pretty sure I brought it with me from England. I've got no idea why I had it then either, to be honest. But I thought I'd have a go with it. Now, the paper is slightly glossier than the Canon Pro Luster paper, but not a massive amount. So I'm going to try printing it with the same print profile, in other words the Pro Luster print profile, and see how it comes out. Now, I think the thing with small prints is not every image is going to work on a small print. Images that have a lot of fine detail in, where you need to be able to see that detail to appreciate the image, aren't going to work. However, if you've got an image that's got some strong lines, very prominent features in, I think that could work pretty well on a much smaller image. So I went back and looked at my last photo shoot, which I did when the storm came through here and we had some rain, and I looked at a couple of images. And I did look at this one because I really like this image. But I think this is an image that does need to be larger, because the image works better if you can see the detail, like the detail in the signs and things like that makes the image more appealing. So rather than that one, I decided to go for this one because it's got a stronger set of lines in it, with the buildings coming in from the side. The lamppost is quite prominent. The composition isn't perfect because the lamppost is blocking off the centre of the tree, but I had to kind of work the composition around where I could get reflections in a very small puddle, so I couldn't get everything perfect. Nevertheless, it's an image that I really like. I love the lighting on it, the mood and everything else. So I think this one could work as a small print. So I'm going to print this one without making any adjustments to the exposure, because as I said, I'd already dialed my monitor brightness back on previous colour prints because I want to see how a colour print comes out on this paper. And I'm going to print it, as I said, 5x7 and borderless, so I want to cover the whole paper. So let's get it printing and see what it looks like. Okay, and there it is, a 5x7 print. I really like it, and the great thing is it would be so easy to display this. You could well, let's just prop it on something like that, just propped up there, and it works. I think there's definitely a place in my future for doing more small prints, either 5x7 or maybe even smaller. Now let's revisit my black and white quickly, because while that was printing I've been having a look at them, and in all honesty, I mean, again, I'm sure you probably can't see any real difference there on the video. In all honesty, I'm not sure. My view is that probably the slightly brighter one might actually work better, particularly when it goes behind glass or plastic, but I'll try that out at some point and share my thoughts on it in a future video. The adventure in printing continues. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Next week should be back out in the field again doing something, no idea where or what yet. You'll have to tune in to find out. Until then, thank you very much for watching. Bye.